reading. I tell you, I'm so glad you're here, though. Just come on in. Come on in and have a seat and let me talk to you. I know you wants to know about the days that I went to school, because you like to tell your children those things. Well, we didn't have school much in our Ozarks. We had to have them after all the crops was put by, and after there wasn't no planting or harvesting to be done. And that's when we could have school. Now, I went to school, Mr. Vinson was the teacher. And the way we knew we was going to have school was ever so often a teacher would come by and put posters around on a tree and say, subscription school, $1 a scholar. And that's what it cost to go to school, was $1. You could go for 1 month. When you went, you were all in the same classroom. You had people from 5 or 6 years old, and sometimes 20 years old, because people did want to learn. So sometimes when them foreigners talk about us Ozark people like we is ignorant, but kind of upsets me. It just really does upset me. You know, one class that I went to, a girl brought a book from home. We all had to bring our books from home because there wasn't any school books, really. Everybody had to buy their own school books. Of course, we bought McGuffey's Readers. That's what we always bought. But a girl come to school, what you did was you brought everything from home that you had that you could read. And that's what we learned from. And that could be the Bible, almanac, some kind of stories. Oh, there was a story about Jesse James, little paperback book. Everybody passed that around. It was so dog-eared, we'd trade with each other. And at night, of course, we didn't have any radio or anything. And that's how we entertained ourselves at night, was reading and reading to each other. But anyway, in this classroom, this little girl, that young'un, brought a thick book that said the complete works of William Shakespeare. It had come over on a boat from England. It was an original, and I don't know how many of us people had some of them around our house. Of course, our houses was all log cabins. That's all anybody had to live in. Nobody didn't know anything. Nobody knew nothing about any other kind of houses. You had to build your own log cabin, but you had neighbors that come around and help you. They would come and we'd have a house raising, they'd call it, or a barn raising, or whatever kind of raising that we had to have, or whatever kind of a building we had to have. And of course, everybody'd bring food. The men would bring something they had shot that day, and we'd build the big fire and cook everything, and the women would bring things they'd fixed at home, and we'd have a big dinner at the end of it. And sometimes we'd have a dance, but dancing was frowned upon by the church. Now, when I say the church, I mean it was either the Methodist church or the Baptist church. Sometime we'd have a big meeting, and everybody, well, Gravel Hill, that's where I lived. Gravel Hill always had the big meeting every year. It was something we looked forward to. Oh my goodness, we'd see people we hadn't seen all year long. That's the only time we seen them was at the big meeting. We really did love to go to the big meeting, because it was like a big family reunion almost, because we got to see family members we hadn't seen in years. Okay. Everywhere we went, there's always food if we got a big crowd of people. And we'd bring food, we'd bring chicken and we'd cook things at home and take it, and we didn't have anything but the fireplace to cook on, but we made custard pies, we made cakes of all kinds, we made cookies, we call them cookies today. I don't even remember what we called them, but they were little sweets. And we bring ham, like a big old ham. And a tradition we had was the top of the ham was all browned and everything, and just before we served it, we'd put 3 circles of black pepper on it. That was decorating. So we'd have that. We'd have, when we really had big food, then that was around the 4th of July. And the men would go out into the woods and find a place for us to have our 4th of July picnic. And that was the biggest excitement in the whole county. It was just so, everybody looked forward to that. And the men would go out and dig a big barbecue pit and make coals down the bottom of it out of the wood, and then they'd put a whole hog down in there, and they'd cover it with coals and cover the whole thing up with dirt, and by the time we got ready to eat, it was all done, and just the best food you could ever want. The kids would be running around. We had rides, we had swings, we had a big swing. The top on it was like that, and then it had little swings sitting down, and a man turned the crank, it went round and round, and the people just went out, just swung out over the fairgrounds. We had all kinds of games. We had the disc toss, we had horseshoes, we had all kinds, just all kinds. We had political speeches too. We had the men that was running for office get up and speak. Now, in that day, it was illegal in the Ozarks to have corn whiskey or to make corn whiskey. But there was a still in every community, and it was hidden. And you had to know the password to get up close to it. Now, I happen to know that ours was King's X. And you had to yell that a long time away, because there was men all around in the hills who wouldn't let you come in unless you knew the password. Why? Because we sold it, but we didn't pay no taxes on it. And that's why the revenuers were always coming after us. They were trying to get the taxes on that whiskey. Well, one of these politicians got up and said, now, when I get down there at that legislature, I'm going to fix a law where we can sell this corn whiskey legal. It's not fair. It ain't fair at all. If I raise that corn out there in my fields and I cut some of it and feed it to my horses, it's mine, ain't it? It's mine when I raised it. It was mine when I planted it. It's mine when I plowed it. And mine when I picked it. So if I feed it to my horses, it's mine, ain't it? And if I take it and I shuck it and I cook it and put it on my table, it's mine, ain't it? And if I take it to the mill and I have it ground up and it gets to be cornmeal, and my wife makes them good corn pones, oh, it's mine, ain't it? If I keep it for seed, it's mine, ain't it? Then I don't know why in blazes when I turn it into corn whiskey, it's not mine. Well, everybody just gave him big clap. Oh, that was wonderful. He was the best one, you know. And the last thing he said was, I can't read and I can't write, but I know what's right. And you all know me, and you know me all my life. Now, I want you to come around the end of the platform and get you some of that corn whiskey I've been talking about. All of you can have it. I'm not charging a penny. You just got it. So if you'll come on and help me with that jug of Mountain Dew, I'll be obliging. I'll be obliging for you both. And then another old man got up. He was the one that was in the legislature at the time. We didn't understand a word he said. He talked about the whereases and the wherefores and the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. We didn't know nothing about that. All we knew about 4th of July was it was a good time, the best time to have our picnic. Now, a lot of matches was made at the 4th of July. Because boys and girls got to see each other that hadn't seen each other in a long time. And you had to go 2 mountains over, they said. The man had to find his bride or he might be kin to her. So he had to go 2 mountains over. But everybody came to 4th of July. I mean, people would come for 100 miles. And that's no lie. They'd come in wagons and they'd come in horse and buggy or mules or whatever. And people would camp out around there if they didn't live close by. So the boys and the girls would meet up. Now, I know some of you think that there was some loose morals in them Ozarks, but no, you had better watch it. If you walk down one of them trails with a girl by yourself, you would get the wrath of her paw right on you. She had to always have a little brother or a little sister or somebody walking with her. Now, they might stay back about 20 feet or so, but they was with her. She was never to go anywhere by herself. Wasn't allowed, not even to sing in school or anywhere. Well, once a young man asked a young lady, "Could I walk you home from church, Miss Sadie?" Everybody knew what that meant. If she said yes, they were about to be courting. And if she said no, that young man hung his head, walked away just so sad. And 3 or 4 of his friends is waiting over there to see what happened. They all started laughing and slapping their legs and everything, just making fun. But let's say she said yes, and he walked her home. Well, that was the first time. And then, if there was a singing school or a church in the morning and he walked home with her and he might have dinner with her and then he'd walk home to his house. Or he might have a horse and put her on the back. But anyway, this was the beginning of the courting. Now, when he came to Miss Leela, when Sam came to Miss Leela and he said, "Miss Leela, may I come and visit you next Saturday?" We knew what that meant. He was going to go there and he was going to spend the night. Now you may think that was really, well, everybody slept in the same room, so there wasn't any hanky-panky or whatever going on. But it would be arranged that the boys, the brothers of the household, would take Sam out and he'd go out and feed his horse, and they'd put the horses up for the night or whatever. And while they were doing that, all of the girls except Leela would get into their sleeping clothes and get in the bed and pull the covers up to the necks. And Ma and Pa got in the bed too. So then the boys had come back in and they didn't get undressed. The brothers didn't get undressed. The younger brother would probably be sent up to the loft to sleep. And he had to sleep on the straw bed. And Leela had threatened him within an inch of his life if he moved, because he didn't want that straw to rattle. Even in a poor family like that, she didn't want Sam to know that they had a cord of a straw bed. She was embarrassed. People had pride. Even if they didn't have things, they tried to do right. They tried to be clean. They tried to go to church. They tried to help each other. And they tried to do right as the Bible taught them. That was all that they knew. And we all believed that God literally wrote the Bible. He took a pen and ink and he wrote the first Bible. But we believed it all the way. So, how would these people ever talk to each other, this boy and girl? Well, one of them would have a cane chair on one side of the fireplace, and the other would have the cowhide chair on the other side of the fireplace. One side and then the other. So they weren't sitting next to each other. But they talked. They talked in very low terms, but anybody who wanted to hear could. They talked in low terms, and they smiled, and they giggled, and they flirted, and that was courting in them days. They could not walk alongside each other without coveting. Just a minute, I'm sorry I don't have enough coffee for every one of you people, but you know, to tell you the truth, I don't even have enough cups for all of you. That's the way it was sometimes. It's gotten a little cold, I guess. Okay. You know, I know I was talking about Sam and Leela. Well, when Sam had to ask Leela's Paul if he could take her if he could have her as a bride. And then, of course, he had to ask Leela. Well, one time when they'd had a little spat, and she wasn't going to walk home with him from church. And he had his wagon. And so she had her little brother with her, and he had his little brother with him. And he said, "Miss Leela, don't you want to ride?" Well, finally she said okay, she'd ride with him. And he said, "Well, looks like Wayman and Waylon has got in the back. I guess you're going to have to sit up there and ugly on me." So he started talking about building a house. "I'm going to build me a house." "You are?" "Yes, I am." "What you building it for?" "Well, I'm hoping there's going to be some little gal that'll come and live in it with me." Well, she knew exactly who he meant, and thought, well, until too long till he asked her, "Would you come and live in that house with me?" And she said she would. So the family started making plans for the wedding. It was the craziest thing, because they didn't let anybody know. I mean, they acted like nobody knew about it except the family. And so they got everything ready, and Sam wore a pair of pressed black jeans, and she wore like a little pinafore type thing, and her hair plaited down the back, and had flowers in her hair, and it was just in the house. But they had to take everything out of the house, scrub the floor, scrub the walls, scrub everything, because they were having the wedding there. And they had the chairs fixed, and they borrowed chairs and everything else, but still nobody knew there was going to be a wedding. Nobody talked about it. But the day of the wedding, then one of the boys of the family would get on a horse and go all over the county, all over the community, saying, "We's inviting you to the wedding." Well, everybody knew, of course, already that it was going to be. But everybody came, and the preacher, well, that's what you could call a preacher, I guess. He came and he said a few little words, and then they jumped over a broom. And they were then married. So they went riding off to the log cabin that Sam had built. And that's the way the marriage started. And people gave them, it was only their families gave them presents. And like her dad gave 1 cow and 6 hens and a rooster or 2. And Sam's folks gave some quilts and things like that. It wasn't a lot of things, but they gave them what they had and what they could. And the weddings were not that big a deal. The ring, there was a blacksmith that made rings out of dimes. And so Sam took him a dime, and he had a little point that started in the dime, and then it would get bigger and bigger and bigger, and he'd smooth it and shine it and everything, and that was what they used for the ring. That was the ring. And sometimes they'd take dimes or spoons or something and put them on the railroad track, let the train flatten them, and then they'd work them until they'd made a ring out of that. But that was the way they started, and it was hard. It was really, really hard. There were animals that would attack panthers. Painters, they were called, painters. And there was a black painter that got a baby one night. It was a couple that had just gotten married. Well, they'd been married long enough to have the baby, but they lived in a small little log cabin, didn't have any windows in it. It was really, really hot weather. So they decided they were going to move the bed right up to the door just to get as much air in as they could. And the father was sleeping on the far side, and then the mother, and then the baby in front, because they were trying to let the baby get as much wind as possible. And during the night, the mother heard something and felt something pulling on the baby. And she woke up, and it was a painter doing that. And that painter grabbed that baby and just ran off with it. Oh my goodness. I don't know why they didn't have any dogs. If they'd had dogs, those dogs would have let everybody know. But they didn't. And that was cause for a posse, or for all the men in the community and the surrounding community to hunt that painter down. And that is another long story. It's true, it was a great comfort. And it's been a comfort and a blessing to me for you to come and see me today. And I really did like telling you them stories. I guess I like to tell it to new people because my children and my husband won't listen to me much anymore. But it's time for me to go because there are chores to be done outside. I need to go feed the chickens. I need to get my bonnet. What do I do with it? Here, put it on the floor. Well, that's not good. But I need to put this on, and I need to go outside and get some of that house and feed it to them chickens. I got to call the cows to come on up for the night, and the pigs. And there's not much telling what else I got to do before I try to cook supper out in the kitchen, in the fireplace. So, Ian's come back to see me, okay? I don't know when you can, but I sure will appreciate it if you'll come back to see me. And I mean that. That's not just a come back. No, I say Ian's come back to see me. Okay? Thanks.
Gravel Hill Township in Van Buren County, Arkansas is the setting for Wayman Hoag's Back Yonder, written in 1932 and annotated in 2004 by Jodie Parsons. It's a story of Arkansas history preserved in her language, her faith, and a spirit of hard work even in the 1920s and 30s. It's about a strong, God-fearing people who lived in the hills. Howard Simon woodcuts and a dialect of the South brings Back Yonder to life again. Back Yonder saves the history of a fast-changing culture. It's now available at the Bella Vista Library, your favorite bookstore, and online at